Have you ever wondered what would happen if a whisper was carried into the wind, and someone or something actually heard it? Not a person, not a rescuer in uniform, but an old dog worn by time, scarred by duty, who still knew what it meant to protect. In today's story from Hero Paw, we bring you a tale unlike any other. A story of silence, survival, and a whisper in the snow that changed everything. What began as one little girl's desperate plea into a storm became a journey of redemption, courage, and the kind of loyalty only a dog could understand. This isn't just a rescue story. It's a story about being found when the world wants to forget you. It's about how one wounded soldier, a forgotten child, and a dog with tired paws found their way back to something called home. Before we begin, I invite you, if you believe in second chances, in quiet heroes, and in stories that touch something deep within, to please subscribe to Hero Paw. Leave a comment below to let us know what moments moved you most. Your support is what helps us create videos that are not only meaningful but crafted with the care and heart these stories deserve. And please stay until the very end, because what happens in the final moments will not only surprise you, just might stay with you. Have you ever been saved by something that couldn't speak, but understood everything? The wind carried secrets that night. Above the frozen pines of Red River, Wyoming, a storm was rolling in from the north, thick with snow, sharp with silence. It was the kind of cold that pressed against the bones, the kind that made even memories brittle. The world was still, save for the hiss of snow against old rooftops and the occasional groan of ice shifting beneath the weight of winter. And in that silence, a whisper broke through. "I'll be better, Mom. I promise." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't even meant to be heard. Just a fragile voice carried on the breath of a girl who had no more strength to cry. Her coat was thin, her hands bare. She stood at the edge of the woods like a ghost the world forgot, small, trembling, and almost invisible beneath the falling snow. No one saw her. No porch light flickered. No window cracked open. No grown-up asked, "Are you all right?" But someone heard her. Or rather, something did. 3 miles away, on the porch of an aging log cabin tucked against the base of Crooked Elk Ridge, a dog stirred. He was old. His name was Bear. A German shepherd, gray-flecked and slow-moving now. Bear had once worn a military vest beside a man with haunted eyes and a scar that never quite healed. He had served in Kandahar, guarded convoys, and once pulled a soldier from burning debris. But those days were far behind him. Now he rested on creaking wood planks and listened to the snow. And that night, in the middle of a gust that swept down from the mountain like a scream, Bear's ears twitched. He stood up, slowly at first, then fully, alert and unwavering. No bark, no warning, just motion. With a suddenness that belied his age, Bear jumped off the porch and vanished into the storm. Inside the cabin, Sam Whitaker was stirring a cup of chamomile tea he wasn't planning to drink. 49, with the build of a man still ready for war and the silence of one who'd seen too much of it, Sam looked up when he heard the front door creak. Then came the sound, a low, sharp bark. Then silence again. Sam didn't hesitate. Combat boots by the door. Heavy coat on. Rifle left behind. He trusted Bear more than he trusted steel. Outside, the wind slapped his face like a ghost with unfinished business. "Bear!" he shouted into the white void. "Bear, come back." But Bear was already gone, swallowed by snow and instinct. Sam followed the paw prints, faint at first, then deeper as he descended toward the woods. His breath turned to knives in his chest. The snow stung his eyes, but he didn't stop. He had learned long ago that when Bear moved like that, there was a reason. Sound, scent, call no human could decipher. Somewhere in that storm a child was breaking. And Bear had heard her. Sam trudged deeper into the storm, boots sinking in the snow with every step. The flashlight in his hand flickered under the weight of the cold, barely piercing the wall of white ahead. Trees swayed like shadows, their branches groaning beneath layers of ice. He could no longer see Bear, but he knew how Bear worked. This wasn't panic. This wasn't age catching up. This was purpose. And then, just past the edge of the tree line, by the rusted skeleton of an old drainage pipe tucked beneath a slope. He saw him. Bear was standing still. His frame, though aged, was firm and protective, facing something just out of the beam of light. Sam moved closer, heart pounding, not from fear but from something deeper, something ancestral, the feeling a man gets when the world shifts beneath his feet. Then he saw her. She was curled tight, knees against her chest, half hidden beneath the pipe's overhang. Her hair was matted to her forehead, her lips blue, her hands wrapped around herself in a futile attempt at warmth. Her coat was torn, one sock missing, the other barely clinging to a bruised foot. Sam dropped to his knees. "Hey," he whispered. His voice caught somewhere between command and prayer. "Can you hear me?" The girl stirred barely. Then she mumbled, eyes half-lidded. "I'm not bad. I just want to be seen." Her voice cracked on the last word, then fell silent. Sam didn't waste a second. He shrugged off his coat, wrapped her in it, and lifted her gently into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Her skin felt like ice. He looked at Bear. "Home. Now." Bear turned instantly, limping slightly, but moving fast through the snow. Sam followed, every step a battle against the wind and the ache in his joints. His shoulder, injured years ago in a blast, screamed with every movement, but he didn't care. The only thing that mattered was the flicker of breath against his neck, the fragile rise and fall of a chest that had almost given up. By the time they reached the cabin, Bear was already scratching at the door with his paw. Sam pushed it open with his boot, rushed inside, and gently laid the girl on the couch near the fireplace. The room, warm and flickering with amber light, seemed to hold its breath. He peeled off her wet clothes, replaced them with blankets and dry flannel. He filled 2 water bottles with hot water, wrapped them in towels, and placed them by her sides. Her fingers were stiff, so he rubbed them gently over and over, until a hint of color returned. Bear lay beside her, chin on his paws, eyes never leaving her face. Time slowed. The storm outside still screamed against the windows, but in here, everything had narrowed down to one thing. Would she stay? Sam sat beside the fireplace, body aching, hands trembling slightly as he stared into the flames. He wasn't praying. He hadn't done that in years, but something in him was reaching, hoping. Minutes passed. Then slowly she breathed deeper. Once, then again. Her chest rose and fell, each motion steadier than the last. Sam exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. "She's holding on," he said softly. He looked at Bear, whose ears twitched slightly at the sound. "You found her. You old miracle." He rose and walked to the kitchen, hands still tingling from the cold. He poured a glass of water for himself, then returned to check on the girl again. That's when he noticed something. A small bulge in the pocket of her torn coat, now crumpled near the hearth. He reached in and pulled out a soaked spiral notebook, its pages bloated from snowmelt. On the front, in uneven letters, "Emily's journal." Sam sat down slowly, flipping it open with care. The ink had run in places, but the words were still legible. Dozens of pages. And on many of them, the same sentence, scrawled over and over like a mantra, like a cry no one had answered. "I'm not bad. I just want to be seen." He closed the notebook, resting it on his lap. His eyes stung not from smoke but from something older. Loneliness. Recognition. He'd seen men write like that in the war. Soldiers who'd lost too much too soon. He'd seen children clutch notebooks like lifelines in refugee camps, using them to scream without making a sound. Emily was no different. A little girl frozen in silence, just waiting for someone to notice. Sam looked at Bear again. The dog was watching Emily closely, his tail giving one slow thump on the floor. Not celebration, but something gentler, something like relief. That night Sam didn't sleep. He pulled a chair next to the couch and sat there for hours, listening to the storm fade into a whisper. then nothing at all. Emily slept on, her pulse steady, her body warm. And Bear, his head resting near her feet, never closed his eyes. Because even now, even off the battlefield, even with snow melting into the floorboards, Bear still remembered what duty meant. And Emily, she had finally been seen. Morning came slowly to the cabin. The storm had passed, but the cold remained, hanging in the air like an old regret. Pale sunlight filtered through frosted windows, casting a soft glow on the wooden floorboards. The fire had burned low, but warmth lingered in the corners, carried not just by heat, but by something quieter. Presence. Survival. Emily still slept, wrapped in flannel and silence. Bear lay close, his eyes closed now, though his ears remained twitching at every sound. Sam stood by the kitchen sink, staring into a chipped mug of coffee gone cold. His body ached from the night before, but what kept him frozen wasn't physical. It was the notebook. He'd read every word, every sketch, every looped, desperate phrase. And one detail, one name, kept echoing in his mind. Tucked inside the back cover, written in faded pencil, were 3 simple words. Emily Rachel Dawson. Dawson. His breath caught. He hadn't heard that name in years. Not since Grace. He turned away from the window and walked into the spare bedroom, once used for storage, now dim and filled with dust. A worn cedar chest sat beneath the window. He opened it with the quiet care of someone disturbing a grave. Inside were the remnants of another time. Old family photos, a wool baby blanket, birthday cards from a different life. And at the bottom, a box of letters tied together with a blue ribbon. He hadn't opened them in more than a decade. His hands trembled slightly as he untied the knot. The first letter was dated 12 years ago. The handwriting was unmistakable. Sharp at first, then softer with each page. As if the person writing had grown more tired with every word. Dear Sam, I don't expect you to write back. I just wanted you to know I'm still here. And yes, I had the baby. Her name is Emily Rachel. She has your stubborn jaw and my eyes. I know what you're thinking, that I messed up, that I should have listened. But I didn't need judgment. I needed my brother. Sam lowered the letter, his throat tight. He picked up another. Dad said I ruined everything. That bringing a baby into this world with a stranger made me a disgrace. But Sam, you didn't say anything. You looked at me like I'd failed you. And that was worse than anger. That was silence. He sank into the edge of the bed, the letter trembling in his hands. Outside the room, the cabin was quiet. Only the faint creak of wood as Bear shifted his weight by the fireplace. And in that silence, Sam found his voice. Not spoken aloud, but echoing inside him like a confession whispered to the dead. I didn't fight for her. I fought in wars, faced down fire and shrapnel. But I didn't open my mouth when it mattered most. He looked at the ribbon, now crumpled in his lap, and felt the sharp sting of memory. He saw Grace, barely 19, standing on the porch with her duffel bag and swollen belly. He remembered their father's voice like a verdict. That child's a stain on this family. You leave and you stay gone. He had stood by the door, fists clenched, heart pounding. But he hadn't moved. He hadn't said a word. And that silence had followed him ever since, across oceans and deserts, across gunfire and funerals. It was the one enemy he could never defeat. Now, the girl sleeping by his fire, Emily Rachel, was the living reminder of what he had lost, of what he had failed to protect. He rubbed his hands over his face, then stood and walked back into the living room. Emily was awake now, sitting quietly, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes met his, clearer than before, but still wary. He didn't speak. Instead, he handed her the notebook she had dropped the night before. She took it wordlessly, hugging it to her chest. Then, after a long pause, she asked, "Did you read it?" Sam nodded. "I did." He crouched beside her, not too close, his voice soft. "I knew someone once. Her name was Grace. She left a long time ago. And I never went after her. Emily looked down, fingers curling around the notebook's frayed edge. She was my mom, she whispered. Sam closed his eyes, a wave of grief crashing inside him. I thought so, he said. There was a pause. She told me about you, Emily said. She said, you used to read scary stories to her when the power went out. She said your voice made them feel less scary. Sam chuckled just once. It was the kind of sound that came from a place long rusted shut. I guess I did. Then, after a breath, I used to think I was brave, that being a soldier meant I could face anything. But I've learned something in the years since. Emily waited, watching him. I was never afraid of bullets, he said. I was afraid of being wrong, of speaking up and losing the family I still had. So I stayed quiet. And that was cowardice dressed as loyalty. He stood slowly, walking to the window. Outside, snow glistened under the gray sky, untouched and silent. Inside, the ghosts stirred. But not to haunt, to be acknowledged. Because only when we speak to the past can we stop it from repeating itself. And in that moment, something shifted in Sam. Not in his body, but in the weight he carried. Emily was not a mistake. She was a chance. Second chance. And this time he would not stay silent. That afternoon, the sky over Red River hung low and gray, as if the clouds themselves were holding their breath. Inside the cabin, the fire cracked softly in the hearth. The room smelled of pine wood and something warm cooking on the stove, chicken broth with rosemary and garlic. Sam moved quietly in the kitchen, letting the rhythm of cooking settle his thoughts. At the table near the window, Emily sat with a pencil in hand and a sheet of paper in front of her. Her shoulders were hunched, her hair still damp from the hot shower Sam had insisted on. Bear lay beside her chair, his head resting across her bare feet, eyes half-lidded but alert. Sam glanced over once, twice. She hadn't spoken much since the morning, but he could see something shifting, something loosening in her posture, like a knot slowly coming undone. Finally, without looking up, she said, "Do you want to know?" He stopped stirring. "Know what?" he asked gently. "Where I was before." Sam turned off the burner, wiped his hands on a towel, and walked to the table. He didn't sit, just stood nearby, giving her space. "I do," he said. Emily didn't lift her gaze. Instead, she pressed her pencil harder against the paper. "I lived with Lisa and Alan," she said. "She's my stepmom. He's not really anything. Just there." Her voice was quiet, even, but not numb. She continued drawing as she spoke, each word falling like a pebble into water. They had a real daughter, Sophia. She had everything. Pink room. Birthdays with cake and glitter balloons. I wasn't allowed upstairs much. I stayed in the basement. Sam's hands curled into fists at his sides. Emily kept going. There was a mat, and a small blanket, and a space heater, but they said I used too much power, so they took it away. She shaded something on the page. Long strokes, firm and deliberate. If I spilled anything, I skipped dinner. Lisa said I was wasteful, that I didn't know how to live in a real family. Her hand trembled slightly, but she didn't stop drawing. Once, she told me I was a ghost. Sam's brow furrowed. "A ghost?" Emily nodded. She said, "You're the shadow your mother left behind. A mistake that should have been buried with her." The silence that followed was thick, almost unbearable. Sam swallowed hard. He didn't know if he wanted to scream or cry or both. But Emily... She stayed still. No tears, no collapse, just quiet unraveling. "They always said I stole things. Sophia would hide stuff, her game console, a bracelet, and Lisa would find it in my pillowcase. I stopped trying to explain. Lisa said lies were in my blood." Sam sat now slowly across from her. "And no one ever asked you what really happened," he said. She shook her head. "No one ever listened." Bear." She set her pencil down and finally looked up. Her eyes were clearer now. But there was something older behind them, something too heavy for a child to carry. I didn't even know his name. That night, I was hiding by the woods. I thought I would just disappear like snow under the trees. But I said something. I whispered it. I don't know why. I just said it to the wind. What did you say? Mass. He paused, then spoke barely above a breath. I'm not bad. I just want to be seen. Bear stirred slightly, tail tapping once against the floor. Emily reached down and touched the thick fur behind his ears. I think he heard me. Before anyone else ever did. She turned the paper around. It was a drawing. A small girl standing at the edge of a forest, the trees like dark towers above her. Her arms were wrapped around herself, her head down. Behind her, a German shepherd stood guard, bigger than life, head lifted, eyes alert. And scrawled across the bottom, in blocky pencil letters. Bear heard me. No one else did. Sam blinked against the sting in his eyes. He leaned forward, one hand resting on the table. Emily, he said, his voice rough with something he couldn't quite control. You never deserved that. Not a single moment of it. She nodded once like she had expected that, but still needed to hear it. Then slowly she pushed the drawing toward him. You can keep it, she said. He took it with both hands, as if it were something fragile, sacred. Bear stood, walked around the table, and pressed his body gently against Emily's legs. She leaned into him without hesitation. It wasn't comfort. It was grounding. Proof that she was still here, still held. And Sam, watching them, man and dog, child and shadow, understood something he hadn't before. This wasn't just rescue. This was rebirth. And Bear, without knowing, had become more than a companion. He was the one who had heard the silence, and refused to let it stay buried. The courtroom was small, old, and smelled faintly of dust and floor polish. It was the kind of room that held decades of forgotten disputes and faded verdicts, a place where words had weight and silence could scream. The snow outside Red River's courthouse drifted gently now, a quiet contrast to the tension filling the narrow space within. Sam sat beside Emily at the plaintiff's table, his shoulders broad under a navy blazer he hadn't worn since his sister's funeral. His right arm hung stiff at his side from a war injury, but his gaze was sharp, steady. Emily sat to his left, legs swinging slightly, her hair pulled back into a soft braid by Sarah that morning. She clutched her small notebook in her lap like armor. Bear lay curled at her feet, calm, silent, but ever alert. Across the room, Lisa Donnelly sat upright, lips tight beneath layers of makeup. Her tailored coat was spotless, her posture practiced. Next to her, Alan looked less certain. He fidgeted with the zipper on his windbreaker and kept glancing toward the exit like a man hoping to disappear before anything began. The judge, a silver-haired woman in her 60s named Judge Elaine Hart, tapped her pen against the wooden bench. Let's begin, she said, her voice even and composed. Danielle Ramos, the social worker, stood first. She presented the documents Sam had provided. Grace's letter, the DNA confirmation, testimony from neighbor Mrs. Appleton, and Emily's drawings. Then it was Lisa's turn. She rose slowly, smoothed her skirt, and addressed the room with a voice that sounded polished, almost rehearsed. Emily's had difficulties, she said. We tried everything. Counseling, school support. But she's withdrawn. Sneaky. She stole from our daughter. A very expensive game system. She turned toward the judge, eyebrows arched in mock concern. We found it hidden in her bedding. She's been acting out for months. It wasn't safe to have her around Sophia anymore. Alan nodded once beside her, not looking at anyone. Emily remained silent. Her grip tightened on her notebook, but her face was unreadable. Judge Hart raised her brow. Sophia Donnelly is here, yes? Lisa hesitated. Yes, Your Honor. A bailiff stepped outside and returned moments later with a small girl in a velvet dress, no older than 7. Her hair was tied into tight blonde pigtails. She looked at the room with wide, uncertain eyes. Sophia walked slowly to the front. The judge leaned down slightly. "Sophia," she said gently, "I just want to hear your version of what happened with the toy. No one is angry. We just want the truth." Sophia's gaze darted to her mother. Lisa gave her a tight smile, a warning hidden behind polished teeth. Sophia swallowed. Then she looked at Bear. The dog had lifted his head, ears perked, eyes locked on hers. Not threatening, not expectant, just present. Then she looked at Emily. Emily didn't move, didn't blink. Sophia's voice came out in a whisper. "I lied." The room stilled. Even the judge paused. Sophia's fingers twisted in the hem of her dress. "Mom told me to hide the toy under Emily's blanket. She said Emily was making everyone uncomfortable. That she ruined things." Lisa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Sophia's voice trembled now. "She told me to say it was Emily. I didn't want to. But she said if I didn't, I couldn't go to Ava's birthday." Judge Hart nodded slowly. "Thank you, Sophia. That was very brave." She looked toward the bailiff. "You may take her back outside." Sophia walked quickly to the hallway, her steps light but nervous. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Lisa stood, eyes wide. "She's confused. She's just a child, she doesn't know what she's saying. This whole thing has been traumatic." She stepped toward Emily, hand half raised in false appeal. That's when Bear rose. No bark, no growl, just a deliberate movement as he stood, walked forward, and placed himself squarely between Lisa and Emily. His eyes never left Lisa's face. It wasn't aggression, it was a message. "Not this time." Lisa froze. The judge watched the scene for a beat longer, then spoke, quiet but firm. "Not everyone needs to speak to make their truth heard." She looked at Bear. "Some truths live in loyalty." Then her gaze returned to Lisa. "And some lies unravel on their own." Lisa backed away. Alan said nothing. He hadn't said anything all morning. Now he just looked at the floor. Danielle stood again. "Your Honor," she said, "given the evidence, the confession, and the danger Emily may face if returned, we recommend she remain under Mr. Whitaker's care." Judge Hart nodded. "I agree." She turned to Emily. "Miss Emily, would you like to say anything?" Emily looked to Sam. He nodded once. She stood, her voice barely above a breath, but unwavering. "I don't want new toys," she said. "Or cake or balloons or anything." She reached down and placed her hand on Bear's head. "I just want to live with him. Because he doesn't lie. And he stays." Judge Hart smiled. A soft, tired smile that only came from years of seeing too much. "Well," she said, "that seems like the best reason I've heard in a long time." She closed the folder in front of her and tapped her gavel once. "Effective immediately. Temporary custody of Emily Rachel Dawson is granted to Mr. Samuel Whitaker. This court session is adjourned." Sam exhaled deeply, his shoulders finally relaxing. Emily sat back down, burying her face in Bear's fur. And Bear, he didn't move. Because he didn't need to. He had already said everything. And today, for the first time in a long time, justice had listened. The days that followed the court hearing unfolded like the first signs of spring. Slow, hesitant, but full of quiet promise. Emily no longer flinched at footsteps or raised voices. Her laughter, once a stranger in the cabin, returned in small, unexpected bursts. She still carried her notebook, still drew in the quiet, but now the pages held color. Trees, sunlight, and always Bear. Sam found himself smiling more. Not often, not loudly, but enough that Sarah noticed. "You look like someone who finally slept through the night," she teased one morning as she handed him a basket of blueberry muffins, still warm. He chuckled. "Maybe I did." Sarah glanced toward the yard, where Emily sat cross-legged in the snow, helping Bear into a soft wool vest. He was moving slower these days. His joints stiffened in the cold, and he sometimes needed a gentle lift to reach the porch. But every morning without fail, Bear rose when Emily did. He followed her from room to room, waited outside the bathroom door, and walked beside her when she stepped into the woods to draw. His steps were slower, but his presence was unwavering, like a guardian etched from loyalty itself. "He remembers them," Emily said one evening as they watched the sun dip behind the ridge. "Remembers who?" "Mas." She looked down at Bear, who lay at her feet, his head resting on her boot. "The ones like me. The ones who were told they were too much. Or not enough. The ones nobody wanted to see." Her voice was soft but sure. Sam sat beside her, sipping from a mug of tea. The snow had thinned that week, revealing patches of pine needles and old stone. She turned to him. What if we made a place? A place for them?" Sam tilted his head. "A place?" Emily nodded. "Not just for us. For kids like me. Ones who got lost before someone found them." He looked out toward the old ranger outpost at the bottom of the hill, a weathered building with a caved-in roof and boarded windows. It had been abandoned for years. But in his mind something clicked into place. Bear's Refuge. The words came unspoken. Took weeks of work. Sam cleared out the debris. Sarah rallied the community. Retired teachers, carpenters, volunteers who knew what silence looked like in the eyes of a child. Donations came slowly at first. Blankets, old books, hand-me-down boots. Then faster. A bakery dropped off bread every Friday. A local church sent bedsheets stitched with names like Hope and Stay. Emily painted the sign herself. Bear's Refuge. Where the unseen are found. They mounted it above the new front door, painted soft yellow with blue trim. It wasn't big, but it was warm, and it was real. On the first morning, 2 children arrived. Siblings, quiet and unsure, holding hands like lifelines. Emily greeted them with cocoa and drawings. Bear, moving with quiet determination, nudged their knees and sat beside them like he'd known them forever. Each day brought more. Children who spoke too little, too much. Children who curled into corners, afraid to take up space. Children who had learned to apologize for breathing. Bear never barked at them, never judged. He just stayed. "Like he knows who needs him," Sarah whispered one afternoon, watching Bear limp toward a boy sitting alone beneath the pine tree. "Like he remembers what it's like to be invisible." Sam nodded. "I think he does." Some nights, Emily stood on the porch long after the others had gone to bed, her breath misting in the cold. "I used to think I was left behind," she said once. "But maybe I was just waiting to be found." Sarah wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "You're not the girl who was left," she said gently. "You're the girl who was returned." And in the distance, Bear sat at the gate, watching the path, waiting. Because somewhere out there, a whisper might still be lost in the trees. And Bear would be ready, not to bark, not to chase, but to listen, and guide them home. Spring had come to Red River quietly. The snow melted into the soil, giving way to patches of soft green and clusters of wildflowers that climbed the hills like whispered prayers. The trees, once stripped bare, had begun to stretch toward the sky again, and the wind no longer howled, it hummed. The old cabin was still. Morning sunlight spilled through the windows in long golden beams, touching the floor, the bookshelf, the worn edges of the rug. And Bear. He lay curled on that rug, his body still and slow beneath a wool blanket. His breaths were shallow now, measured, fragile. His muzzle, once deep gold and brown, was silvered with age. His limbs trembled with the effort of each inhale, but he made no sound. He had given all of himself, and now he was fading. Emily sat beside him, cross-legged, a worn book open in her lap. She read softly, barely above a whisper, her voice steady even as her hand trembled against Bear's fur. He blinked slowly. She reached out, brushing her fingers over the white patch on his chest, the one she used to press her ear against when she couldn't sleep. "You're the reason I'm still here," she whispered. "You found me. You stayed. When no one else did." Bear's ear twitched. "I promise," she said. "No child will ever be invisible again. Not if I can help it." Her voice cracked, not from sorrow, but from the weight of a vow that had taken root inside her heart. You don't have to worry anymore. Bear exhaled slowly, his chest rising once, then falling. His eyes, clouded but full, found hers one last time. Then he closed them and rested. There was no sound, no bark, no whimper, just stillness and peace. The kind that comes when a life has fulfilled its purpose. Emily didn't cry, not then. She leaned forward and placed her forehead gently against Bear's, staying there for a long time as the light slowly shifted across the room. Later that day, Sam built a small wooden marker beneath the pine tree at the edge of the property. It was a place Bear had often wandered to, where he liked to sit and watch the trail that wound down toward the valley. They laid him there, wrapped in the same blanket he had curled beneath in the cabin beside the fire on the night he brought Emily home. It was Sarah who found the right words. "He didn't just save lives," she said, her voice soft and steady. "He changed them." The children of Bear's Refuge came in small groups to say goodbye. Some left notes. Others left drawings or scraps of ribbon. One little boy placed a single red crayon at the base of the tree. "He let me be quiet," the boy said, "and still liked me anyway." Weeks passed, and Bear's absence settled over the cabin like a hush. Not heavy, not haunting, just present, like a memory so full it couldn't be spoken. But it didn't end there. It never really did. On the first anniversary of Bear's passing, Emily, now older, taller, her voice stronger, stood beneath the same pine tree with a wooden plaque in her hands. She had carved it herself, the letters imperfect but clear. Bear's Refuge, where silence is heard. Sam helped her mount it above the front door of the outpost. The paint was still drying, but the message was permanent. That afternoon, the children gathered in the main room. They read poems, shared stories, and for the first time, Emily told her own out loud. About a dog who heard a whisper in the snow and followed it all the way to her. The wind rustled gently through the trees outside. And inside the home he had inspired, there was warmth, laughter, and the steady sound of footsteps. Some hesitant, some sure, but all headed toward something that looked a lot like healing. 'Cause Bear had taught them something. Not with words, but with presence and love. The kind that doesn't need to speak to be understood. The kind that stays, even after it's gone. Some angels have 4 legs, graying fur, and no need for words. But they leave a legacy written in every child who sleeps without fear.